So thank you for coming today. I'm here to give it's not actually my talk, it's my boss's talk, who couldn't be here, so he asked me to come and do it. So I probably won't be able to do it as well as he can, but I will give it my best. And a lot of the principles are things I 100% believe in anyway. So I'm Steve McDougall, and we are at the Nordic APIs Platform Summit. I want to say thank you for having me, and I've had a really good conference so far. I hope you all have too. So this is me. I like playing with AI. I like to make myself look slightly more attractive using modern technology. You can find me on GitHub, Twitter, and most places as just Steve King. The reason for that is I took my wife's name when I got married, so I apologize for any confusion if you ever see just Steve King or Steve McDougall and you're like, make up your mind. I do developer relations at a company called Treblle. We do API observability and monitoring, and it's a lot of fun. So usually what I do with every talk is take a selfie. Do you mind if I take a selfie? Perfect. Oh, wait, no, not that way. It's a new phone, admittedly. Say cheese. Thank you very much. So, a little bit of context. What is Treblle? So, we're an API observability platform. We've got roughly around 40,000 registered developers on the platform at the moment. Give or take 10,000 APIs at the moment. It kind of goes up daily, so this could be wrong because I wrote this yesterday. So on average, we're processing about 500,000 requests a month. And it's a crazy amount of data. So that what we've learned so far is that on average, each API has about 18 endpoints that we've seen. They averagely make around 100,000 requests a month. Average response speed is about 792 milliseconds for the average API that we've seen. Average response size is about 4 kilobytes. That's not gzipped or anything. And the average score that we give it is about 54 out of 100. So we've got something called the Treblle score, which will mark it based on performance, quality, and security, and which is all about best practices, basically. So I think we can all agree that building APIs is quite hard. And we've probably all seen things like this before, right? We've got a nice 200 OK response coming back from the server, but oh, actually, no, we decided we actually want to not let you do this. So ignore the HTTP standard and please read our JSON response. So who are you actually building an API for? There's so many different types of people that will use an API, so it's important to think about those users. You've got your back-end developers. I apologize if there's any cultural differences. This is Bob's Burgers. If you haven't seen it, please do watch it. It's fantastic. We've got back-end developers. We've got front-end developers who like to work with our APIs. Mobile developers who typically like to party and play with iOS devices. We've got QA engineers who like to test and make sure that things are working as they should do. And finally, we've got the people from product who kind of keep us on track, keep us in line, and say, can you stop playing with that and please just do the tasks that I've asked you to do? Or in my case, please stop using GIFs for everything and just do your job. So, again, as I said, I like to play with AI and Midjourney. I asked Midjourney to create me Moses, drinking a coffee, working on some new commandments for the modern age. I did not realize that Moses was so ripped, to be honest. He's been hitting that gym, hasn't he? So, the first commandment is to be practical. And what I mean by that is use a modern content type. A lot of the time, in older industries, maybe we'd use XML, understandable. Use JSON. It's more lightweight, it's easier to read, and as developers, I think we prefer it, right? We don't want to use HTML, XML. URL form encoded, or even form data, unless we have to. You know, if you're uploading an image, fair enough, I'll let you off, but any other reason, please don't. Be methodical. So, you want to get some users. You want to post to create a new user. If you want to update a user, use a patch request. If you want to update a user more than one field, use a pull request. If you want to get rid of something, hopefully not me giving this talk, please use delete. Be semantical. I had to check that that was actually a word. So, if you're going to get a user, do it like this. You want to be using plurals for all of them, for all of your resources. Pluralized resources, it makes more sense. If you want to get all of your users, don't create some random name. Use a standard. Get users. It's very informative. You can understand what the person is trying to do at that endpoint. If you want to create a user, for example, don't create a random URI endpoint called create. We're creating an API, not a web interface. So please, just post to users. It explains itself. If we want to update a user, yeah, it's not early 2000s anymore. We don't have to say, when you put to this endpoint, we're going to update the user. We understand modern standards now, so we can just put to users with a UUID. The UUID is important. If you want to get comments for a user, for example, use sub-resources. JSON API standards, house standards. There's lots of good standards out there that make your API discoverable. You don't have to cannibalize the URI to make it obvious what's going on. Be secure. So, if you're not using HTTPS in 2023, then shame on you. Shame on you. As Jake the dog is clearly saying, please do. It's 2023. It's easy to add security to your API. Treat your API like your house. You've got a key. You lock the door, I hope. You wouldn't just give that key to anyone. So add HTTPS, use authorization. Make sure that you know who's coming into your API and what they might be doing. Use a UUID over a sequential ID. Sequential IDs are predictable, traversable. A UUID, you've probably seen them before. No one can guess that easily. Go serverless. Serverless reduces any potential vulnerabilities that your traditional server might have. Things like Apache, things like Nginx. They're reverse proxies. They're fantastic for building quick websites, quick applications, quick APIs. But they expose a lot of information to anybody who might be looking at your API. So clean up those headers. Your programming languages, your server applications, they have ways that you can reduce those headers so that you're not exposing the specific version of server that you might be using. If you're not going to go serverless, then it reduces the information that a potential attacker could have. And always be updating, staying on top of any sort of updates that are available for your programming language, for your framework, for your server technology. Making sure that you're keeping up with those patch updates is really important. Consistency is key when it comes to an API. As you can see, we've got two very different payloads there. Yeah, great, they're both using UUID. Somewhat consistent, but they're not. Having a look at them, if your API isn't consistent, as a developer, I've got to keep going back to your docs to understand, okay, what's going on this bit? what's going on in that bit. It's not predictable. There's no consistency. It starts to become not enjoyable to work with. Be organized. Use versioning for your API. So I really do like big mouth and animated cartoons. So versioning's important. If you don't use versioning, then you're forcing potential breaking changes based on business decisions to your end users. They aren't going to keep reading your docs. If you send them email alerts saying we're changing this endpoint, we're going to do this, are they really going to read it? I know I don't read my emails. Start yesterday. Adding versioning is important. Make sure if you aren't doing it, there might be a reason, but if there isn't a reason, at least starting with a V1 to get started will protect your users in the future. Enforce versioning. You can do lots of enforcement in your API spec, inside your application. You can add redirects. You could do a million things to enforce versioning. But keep it simple. When we're talking about versioning in API, we're not talking about semver. We don't want 1.0.12 because we decided we'd push a patch update. Keep it simple. Keep it at the major version only. And adapt it to your needs as you go. So be graceful. What do I mean by that? Things fail all the time, and it's absolutely fine. Knowing how we handle those failures is the most important part of any of that. So using properly labeled HTTP response codes, 100, 200, 3, 4, and 500, use them correctly. And I realized when I created this slide that almost looks like the Google colors. I'm not sponsored by Google. I'm not accepting sponsorships by Google. But it looks pretty. So trying to predict where others will fail will allow you to provide them with extra details. Failure is going to happen. Saying an API is never going to fail or there's never going to be a problem is naive. We're developers, we're humans, we make mistakes. We're just very good at covering up our mistakes. So and always try to be consistent with error codes and response error codes and response codes, using the proper HTTP response codes, adding in some actual useful information, human-readable information into those errors is vital. It's why the JSON API specs got a whole page full of API problem. Be smart. APIs are the brain of your application a lot of the time. They understand a lot of things. They give access to all different people to use your application. So you've got to make sure you protect your most valuable asset, which is the database. You're going to handle some complex processes. So you don't want to just give JSON access to your database by saying, okay, I've got all of these database tables. That means I need all of these resources, which means that I need CRUD operations on each of them. You need to add some level of obfuscation there. And you want to optimize your API for that cross-platform experience. I've realized that I'm running out of time a little bit, so I'm going to speed up. If I go over anything too fast, please let me know and I can answer questions at the end. Be lean. So being fast starts at the database level. The less data you're sending, the faster it's going to be. Using something like gzip or Treblle, use a CDN. You want APIs, they're meant to be fast. Make sure you're trying to make that as lean as possible. If there's something that can be asynchronous, push it to an asynchronous queue. 5 minutes. Remember that caching is your best friend. Caching is super important. It means that you don't have to do a whole round trip to the server sometimes. You may not have to go do a database query. You may not have to do some expensive lookup. So make sure you add caching where you can. If you can use HTTP 2 or HTTP 3, please do. HTTP 1 was great. It's served us for a very long time, but it's time to set that one out to rest. Let's upgrade to HTTP 2 or 3 because it's more secure, it's faster, it's more modern. So, pay to win. Use something like Cloudflare, Fastly, any CDN provider. Adding that CDN, it mitigates risk of any DDoS attacks, as well as so many other potential benefits. And be considerate. People are going to use this API, right? So it can be pretty lonely at the beginning, but there's literally loads of people depending on you to do a good job. You might be in the corner building the API thinking, is anyone ever going to use this? But remember, someone one day will use this API. Loads of people might use this API one day. So you want to make sure that it works well, it's nice to work with, it's enjoyable to work with, and as a nod to my previous speaker, it is well documented. So thank you for listening.